Hello, welcome back to a very unique episode of Pass the Torch Legacies in Jewelry. My name is Nadja de Van Diest. I have been conceptualizing this podcast episode for a really long time, and it's a bit of a nod back to my expertise and talent in the speech and debate realm. We're going to be doing a Lincoln Douglas debate today, and the reason why I love Lincoln Douglas debates, they originated between Abraham Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas during their campaign for the United States Senate seat in Illinois. And the way that the debate format is structured is it really allows for a conversation on the morality of something versus just getting nitpicky on policy. What we are going to be debating today is creativity, and more specifically, the implementation of artificial intelligence within creativity. I want to give each of the participants today an equal opportunity to present their case. We are welcoming Jean-Paul from JPX Jewelry and Michael Robinson from David Michael Jewels onto the podcast today. Jean-Paul has been very adamant and vocal about using artificial intelligence into his business and into his design profile. And Michael Robinson, who is no stranger to this podcast, couldn't be more opposite. He truly makes everything one of a kind, handmade, and doesn't implement any technology really into his design. There's no computer anywhere near him or even a laser or anything like that. So the two of them could not be more polar opposite on this topic. They're both also very vocal people who are passionate about this topic. And I want to give them the opportunity to share with you, the audience, their perspective and give you, the audience, the opportunity to think deeper about this subject and draw your own conclusions about where you fall on either side of the debate. So the debate format gives each person the opportunity to present their perspective as well as cross-examine each other. And again, this is just so nostalgic for me. I was a debater in high school and even a little bit into college. I have done this debate format 1,000 times. I think it is valuable and leaves it, honestly, even a little bit open-ended at the end for viewers and listeners to draw their own conclusions however they see fit. So this is a opportunity to start the conversation. I haven't really seen anyone seriously tackle this on a formal platform. I've seen it, go down in the Instagram comments, but I wanted to really think about this intentionally and give both gentlemen the opportunity to bring their best presentation forward. Very briefly, before we jump into this debate, I want to tell you guys an embarrassing story with a fantastic outcome. There was a moment in Tucson towards the very end, and as many people know, I got really sick after Tucson. So I wasn't sick yet, but I could tell that my body was just really getting run down. And I found Chapin at the SNAG conference area, which is Society of North American Goldsmiths. Chapin is a very safe person to me. I kind of just I let my guard down and I was tired and exasperated. I could tell that I was kind of off the clock, which normally I'm pretty on the ball. You never know who's watching. Oh, my dog just walked into the shop. At this SNAG conference area, they have multiple tool vendors who are stationed, which is so fantastic for jewelers. If you are going to Tucson, I recommend every year that you stop by the Society of North American Goldsmiths setup because it was really beneficial to see all these brand new tools lined up. But I knew going into Tucson that I needed a planishing hammer. And so so there was the booth there for Pepe tools. And I thought about I went over to the planishing hammer and I thought about it. And then I walked away and then I was chatting it up with Chapin. And then I came back and I was, well, I don't want to buy it right now. But then I remembered, normally at shows, if you're in person, they give a little bit of a discount. And I was like, well, maybe I should buy it. I was having this internal conversation about whether or not I was going to buy this planishing hammer. And eventually I just kind of looked over at David, who is the executive over at Pepe, and I was like, fine, I'll buy it. I just like threw my hands up. It was more sassy than I am in my normal setting when my circadian rhythm is at equilibrium. Could have reined it back a little bit. I could tell that I was hitting my wall, if you will. And so anyways, so David was going to check it out and have me buy the planishing hammer. And all of us were kind of having this like natural banter between us. And Chapin was like, well, there you go. Now you can talk about it on Pass the Torch. And David goes, oh, wait, you're Pass the Torch? And I was like, oh, no. Like, I think because Pass the Torch as a name has become recognizable, but my name is difficult. Nadja is not a very common or memorable name, not easily memorable at least. I tend to go around my life thinking that people don't realize it's me running this podcast. They may be familiar with my voice, but very few people watch it on YouTube or the video on Spotify. And so I just immediately was kind of embarrassed. I was like, oh, shoot. I feel like I put myself on blast there. I probably should have been a bit more reserved and less like kick off my shoes and be casual kind of moment. But anyways, David was like, oh, we love Pass the Torch and we love what you do. We should talk. And I was like, oh, okay. Like I kind of took an exhale and I was like, yeah, I would love that. I mean, I'm a natural customer of yours, of Pepe's, and maybe there would be some opportunity for Pepe to sponsor Pass the Torch. As all of you know, I've been doing this podcast for over a year. There have been a few conversations with a couple different companies. One of the really key elements for me is that I don't want to promote anything that I don't personally use. The whole point of Pass the Torch is to promote a very high level of craftsmanship in this industry, speaking to the best of the best and learning from them. And I don't want to promote anything that I don't personally use. And so Pepe was like a really easy transition for me into what would it look like to have a sponsor. There's an overwhelming amount of my personal tools that I have bought through the last couple years that have been from them, including my rolling mill, my engraver, lots of little ring benders, tools, all of it. And it was just a really easy, like, yes, like I would love to. So without further ado, I would love to introduce Pepe Tools as the sponsor of Pass the Torch. And I was so grateful how organically that relationship happened. And it is a relationship. It's an ongoing relationship. They want to support me. I would love to promote them because I genuinely use their equipment. And that's really important for young jewelers, as I know I talk to so many of the young people entering this industry, because I think that their pricing for their tooling is fair and accessible. And so when I was going through and starting to build out my shop very novicely, they were one of the very first people that I purchased from. And so, yeah, it just feels like a really organic relationship. And I feel like they saw me at my worst right out the gate, and they still liked me and they still valued what I was doing and how I was going about it. And they value this podcast and the work that I'm putting into it. So I'm really grateful and have a lot of joy building the relationship with them and bringing them into my personal shop. Thank you so much for listening. Here's the debate. All right, we're going to get started here. I have both gentlemen on the call with me. Thank you both for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Great to be here.
So what's really cool about a Lincoln Douglas style debate is I present a thesis statement and both individuals will argue either for or against this thesis statement. So our thesis statement today that we are going to be focusing on is: the integration of AI, artificial intelligence, in jewelry design does not undermine sorry, I need to do that again.
No do-overs.
The integration, what?
No do-overs.
No, I'm doing it again. The integration of AI in jewelry design does not undermine the integrity of creativity. So how we're going to do this is I'm going to give JP the floor first, and then we will have Michael Robinson follow up with his experience And then the two of them will have the opportunity to ask each other questions and cross-examine their experience that they have presented. So thank you both again for jumping on and being willing to put yourselves out there. JP, you have the floor.
Cool. Nadja, super exciting subject, really fresh. This is, that, so I'll just explain who I am. Jean-Paul Baudet is my last name. Xavier is my business. We do a similar thing, Michael. I studied industrial design and mechanical engineering. I did a trade in fine furniture making. And then I worked for a designer at my last year of college, Mark Harrison. I moved over to the States, got a job with David Yeoman. I worked in quality assurance for 3.5 years. Then I worked in R&D for the remaining 6.5 years at my 10 years there. Learned a lot about jewelry, introduced their aluminum program to sort of do those sort of jar-esque and emerald-esque, aluminum pieces that David Yeoman now does in their own style of high jewelry, which is super fun. Worked a lot on titanium and was sort of in this little bubble with their senior jeweler, engineer, problem solving a lot of the challenges that David Yeoman had for their jewelry. So my background is sort of in corporate jewelry. And then in 2020, I started JPX Jewelry, which we do really custom jewelry. And there's a heavy focus on unpacking stories and then building that into jewelry. And we try to make everything to a high jewelry standard. I recently started a partnership with a brilliant software engineer, Sarosha, and she's worked in AI her entire career. And initially, I was, I'm my business is drawing and taking ideas and putting them on paper. So the thought of AI was terrifying. And I was like, you know what? People fear what they don't understand. So I'm going to see if I can make this work. This is, when I've talked to, in the last few weeks, I've talked to some of the biggest companies in the jewelry game, at least in America, about what Facet Flow does and how AI can help jewelers. So let's focus on creativity. I think my argument, I'd actually really love to be on the Michael side and, debating in favor of that it's the worst. Because I think on one aspect, if you use AI to prompt, and there's a bunch of facets of AI, which I think will break down, but if you use AI to prompt and be your creative mind, there's no way it's going to help your creativity. But having said that, I think there's 3 ways it's going to help improve the jewelry landscape and help people be more creative. I think one, it's going to save jewelers an enormous amount of time and money because it is basically like an assistant. And I very much think about it like the introduction of planers and thicknesses and power tools into the woodworking world. Those would be what your assistant would do for you. And if you've ever dressed 4 sides of a piece of rough sawn wood, you know how time consuming that is and how amazing it is to have technology and tools to cut out time so you can focus at the bench. And I know for a fact, at least in our studio, that it saves us time in pricing things out, gathering stones from our existing database of amazing stone suppliers. You can ask it questions in how to sort those stones out for you. Which ones give the client the best value? Do you see any issues with these diamonds in particular that you should draw to my attention? You can ask it stuff that obviously and if you want to look at the GAA certs and really deep dive, which you should be able to do, you can fast track a lot of that. And it's freakily good. But the pricing thing is really super important, I think, to a lot of jewelers because it's the biggest barrier to sales that they have. And it's something that most of them kind of hate doing, coming up with a complex bill of materials. And the jewelry that I make is difficult and time consuming to price out because there's often custom cut baguettes and then there's lots of engraving work and there's, different metals and there's different gemstones. So coming up with an estimate for a client can take time and it's an expensive mistake to make, but it can be done incredibly quickly by referencing your previous work and an AI model. So that's one aspect of it that I think will actually cut an enormous amount of time out of the day-to-day of jewelers out there. 2 would be the underlying principle of design taught in the Bauhaus schools right through to my university industrial design degree. The friends of mine throughout the industry who've studied at Stevens and Pratt and people I've met in the industry, it's velocity of design, velocity of ideas rather. That's how great companies, IDEO, Frog Design, Lalique, David Webb, Fabergé, all of these brands work off a velocity of ideas process. And if we really think about it, the grand scheme of things, Mozart, Picasso, Shakespeare, notably those three people in three different creative fields, produced the greatest volume of work and had the all-time hits in terms of art pieces, plays, and compositions. So really, if you're in the design field, you're in the velocity of ideas realm. And the faster you can get your ideas to reality, the better you're going to be at executing an idea that is amazing and creative. And we all know that AI can assist you with that. And one thing that we've found in our studio specifically, and something that we've worked on with outside consultants, sometimes JPX Jewelry does design consulting work for other firms, so they can leverage our in-depth knowledge of jewelry manufacturing and jewelry production. But quick illustrating and quick, ideating with, I'm using this like as if it's my phone, but quick photographs and uploading it to Facet Flow AI model, whatever you want, Nana Banana, lots of companies are doing this at the moment. You can create ideas immediately and you can bring them to life in metal, which up until yesterday, that sort of wasn't possible. But now you can do some really amazing stuff. Another level that I've found is the huge cost saving I'm getting with all of my enamel work. Enameling is wildly time consuming. It's expensive to cast jewelry. And if I want to test out my new designs with different colored enamels in gold, or in silver, that's a huge expense, but I can immediately test every single color by taking a photograph of all of my samples and then using AI to basically upload those materials into new designs, or taking photos from existing designs and putting enamels, textures, different materials into those. And I'm looking at a piece that's almost so realistic I could put it on the website. So that's huge for jewelers. And then the other component now is that there's this whole world of ridiculously creative people. If we think about the invention of the photograph, right? That put out of business all of these oil painters who were trained to do this one thing that was super important to humanity. And what was the repercussions of that? We saw the Impressionists and the Surrealist movement kind of be born out of this, what was the death of art. Photography was the death of art. And so then we saw this okay, well, now we can get a photo. It's going to open doors. And this is what AI will do, is it'll open doors to all of those jewelers who are crazy talented at the craft aspect, like wizards with their hand tools, but maybe not as in depth as maybe someone like me or somebody else in the actual designing process. Like they just struggle with that one barrier of pen to paper. It will open doors, and all of a sudden you'll be Eric Clapton watching Jimi Hendrix coming out, belting out like the world's most phenomenal music. That's going to happen in the jewelry space, because AI is going to let someone who's wildly creative, but just in their own way with their craft, remove those barriers to actually ideating their ideas. As much as that kills me, because I personally believe you can't be a good designer if you can't draw. I am open to that actually changing, and I think AI is going to completely remove that obstacle.
Yeah. Before we proceed, can I just ask really quickly a clarification question to you? How do you implement AI into your design work? Because I know that you have.
Yeah. So everything is sketched by hand. The entire design process is what will soon be like the Luddite process. It's all paper on pen, and I do multiple sketches and to follow that same design process. What I will do is if a client is having trouble visualizing the idea, sometimes I can show something that's like-minded, and they may not just get it. Not everybody, especially they're coming to me because they, want help creating their ideas. So they're not always visual people. So on the very smallest scale, I could take a napkin sketch and I can turn that into something that's much more impressive. Like a watercolor painting will take days. It might take 4 hours. It could take 8 to do something really intensive that is really realistic. But I can get a napkin sketch to a somewhat realistic piece of imagery where the client's like, wow. And then I can take a photo of a stone and put that into the napkin sketch's sort of rendering. And the client's like, oh my God, that's amazing. That's one aspect. I can take a photo of a clay model. I can transfer those lines into engraving lines. I can do a black and white outline. I can print those and I can start cutting my idea immediately. I can take an existing piece of photography, an engagement ring, and I can swap out the stones. As I mentioned, all of the pricing, you can do that. I did an emerald carving concept. I took a photo of the client stone. I took a photo of our actual emerald carving, and I amalgamated the two ideas together. It's a wildly powerful tool. And then the other component would be the velocity of ideas in terms of like you can iterate lots of ideas quickly on pen and then bring them to life, using your software and then change the texture. My last point, I think that is also really interesting for people that are really interested in design is almost always I have zero references for what I'm thinking about and trying to design. And so if we're doing at the moment, agave turning into fire for somebody's ring, and there's like no reference. Like an artist is painting a landscape, they have a reference. So I'm able to quickly sketch shapes, turn them into metal, and then I've got references to actually paint against, which is phenomenal. I can bring in textures and materials into objects. Like I could turn a ring into like a woven fabric and then make it metal. And it's like, oh, wow, that's what that looks like. Now I can actually paint it in.
Okay. Thank you, JP. Michael, you have the floor.
Cool. Okay. My name's Michael. I've been on the podcast before, so some of you might know me. I won't go into who I am too much. I've been making jewelry professionally for like 30 years now, always self-employed or with a family business. I'm a high school dropout. I didn't go to a fancy art school. I haven't worked for big brands. I've just been doing my own thing my entire life. So that's me. Okay, so to go through some points, I made a little bit of notes. Honestly, there's a lot to go over. I'll start off with time. Time one, I wrote down it's about saving time and money. The saving time one is always something that I don't think is necessarily wrong, but it always makes me cringe a little bit because I get people need to make money. I don't know where the saving time thing becomes such a focus because, we're trying to get clients and audience to be interested in what we do. And I feel like the best way you can do that is respect their time by giving your time to the work you're doing. And in cutting out time, it's like the work almost isn't important to give my time to. It just always makes me cringe a little bit when people complain about time. They somehow think I have more hours given to me in my day than other people have. I'm just a big believer in that jewelry is special. The jewelry that I do and where I focus in on is that it's special. And because it is special, I'm not trying to get a product as quickly as possible. Totally, totally valid way to go. But like, I just give it my all. I savor the time. To be honest, as I'm speaking, it's not really just to show the audience that I respect their time enough to give my time. It's because I love what I'm doing. I genuinely love what I'm doing. And as JP was talking, I'm thinking to myself, actually, it's quite cool if people use AI and technology if they don't share the same love of doing what they're doing, because I hope that it would free up enough time for them that they have time to put to something that they actually do feel is worthy of giving their time to. So that's kind of cool. Saving money. Money is a big thing. I'm not really a money thoughts sort of a guy, so I might leave that one alone. But my next note I put down was brand velocity. Again, I can't argue that. I guess where we first got into the talk and the debate in your comments section, Nadja, was JP's discussion of like what I get is everybody's doing this. Everybody thinks speed. Everybody, and that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. First of all, there are people making jewelry that aren't a brand. There are single people just like they're not a brand. It's not about velocity. It's not about getting product out there. It's about enjoying the journey and creating something special. And I do worry that like when CAD came along, it kind of took a whole lot of the satisfaction of acquiring talent out of it, because whilst CAD is still a process that human does with the aid of a computer, it then resulted in 3D printed or CNC in the early days milled pieces. And I worry that it took the sense of accomplishment out of the act of creating something by hand. And I know that as AI comes along and with the way that well, again, I don't know a lot about AI, but I get there's a big thing about scrubbing designs off the internet and where they actually get the data and stuff from. And I mean, you've probably seen it too. The amount of artists that I follow that are getting off Instagram because they don't want AI programs taking their styles and stuff. Anyway, this may be veering off a little bit. I worry that it robs people of the joy of actually accomplishing something themselves. And then the last thing, I didn't take a great note on, I've just written down photograph. And I kind of get that. I get that argument a lot from people. I think it's kind of different though. Like photography could take a great portrait, but it didn't pretend it was a painting. It was a new category all of its own. A photograph didn't pretend to be a painting. People say like technology, it always advances. Cars took over from horses, but a car didn't pretend to be a horse. It was its own thing. And I think that's what bugs me the most about AI. If people were honest and authentic and disclosed it, it would be cool. But they're sort of taking the shortcut without disclosing it. And I've seen so many CGI videos where people comment on how great the craftsmanship is, and the person just says thank you. They don't tell them it's not reality. And I've often said that's kind of like walking up to Toby Maguire and saying how great it is when he can swing from buildings in his Spider-Man suit, and Toby just saying, thanks, yeah, it is fun. Like all I'm looking for is like we're in the jewelry industry. If a gemstone has a particular sort of treatment, it needs disclosing. I feel like there should be this authenticity where if somebody's starting a brand and putting in a bunch of prompts and using AI to present that they're this big company with a lot of stock, I feel like that sort of thing should be disclosed. How am I doing on time? Should I keep on rambling or is that about it?
You're okay. I just want to refocus everyone here and ask the question, do you believe that artificial intelligence in jewelry design undermines the integrity of creativity?
I think it undermines it in that it probably stops a lot of people that would have tried and actually become genuinely creative rather than artificially creative. I think it cuts off any incentive because there'll be 300 million other people putting out AI slop sort of product pictures. And then where's like I've seen this in art where people are just feeling very flat and like, what's the point? Somebody's going to be scanning these pictures and using them to create their own work before I've even had time to master this ability. So I feel like it hurts creativity and the point that it's just like, where's the motivation? Where's the motivation going for younger people to actually master a skill? I just think younger people might think, oh, well, this journey is just way too big to take on now because the motivation isn't there.
Meaning the motivation to learn the skill how to do it?
Yeah, like when CAD came along, like I'm sure JP would agree, a lot less people can do nice sketches and paintings nowadays than 100 years ago or 50 years ago or even probably 20 years ago because like it got replaced by like computer aided mirroring and copy and pasting and just putting things together without any resistance at all. I get contacted so many times asking who does your watercolor renderings? Can we do it? And obviously it's me, so no, I can't do other work for other people. But I know that that market, even just in terms of hand sketching, has shrunk so much. And I feel like that'll be the same because if you're CAD and 3D printing, like, yeah, if there's AI, you're removing the human element anyway. Why not just remove it altogether and sort of like mail it in from the sidelines?
So this is really interesting. I find that you both are cut from a similar cloth in the way that you both do hand renderings, but then your approach is entirely different. JP, do you feel like, as someone who also hand renders, do you feel like the implementation of AI removes the human element?
I mean, yeah, for sure. I mean, it's undoubtedly, that's undoubtedly the case. It really depends on like, what do you mean by human element? Like, as in, can I make something that is meaningful? Um, I'm in business because I I make pieces of jewelry that have meaning to people. So if your question is, can you make jewelry that has meaning to people with AI? I think undoubtedly yes. I think it's. I want to unpack a thought that maybe will support the why. What Michael's saying is very valid. I think what'll happen in the future, and this is what I'm doing in my business, is I'm building a part of what I give to my clients, which is called proof of work. The companies that just sort of produce AI slop. I think I think as of today, yesterday, which is the AI revolution, I think proof of work is super valid and going to be very important. And the stack of illustrations and all of the failed designs that I do that don't make it to the watercolor will be part of what a client receives as like a proof of work, because it's the actual, the fact that they know that Michael is sitting there doing everything by hand that makes it super special. And I think that fact that he's doing it by hand is intrinsically the special part, just like a, Patek Philippe watch is, the higher end ones are that the sprockets are hand cut. That's valuable for no practical reason whatsoever. That's valuable to people. Human beings are just intrinsically are drawn to something that another human being has put their heart and soul into. And one thing I'm learning from Michael and my discussion about CAD design and hand fabricating is that I'm more and more understanding why Michael is really passionate about the physical act of doing it. And then there's this component to clients saying, yeah, he made that by hand. Like every single thing was just rolled out mill stock and sheet. That's important. And I think like on my end, on the design end, my business and designs, it's very much story centric. And so the making of it is to achieve the best possible result I can get that's the closest to the design, which is why I do employ CAD a lot. We do hand fabricate lots of parts for a lot of our designs, and some of our designs are mostly hand fabricated with some castings. But anywhere where I feel like the design will be better and more true to the design if I cast it or I 3D print it, I'll do that. If I think it needs to be fabricated, I'll fabricate it. And often the wire elements in my work and some of the flower elements, some of those things are all hand fabricated. A lot of them, because of the shapes and the designs that we do. Some things I would say are kind of impossible to fabricate by hand or would be insanely time consuming. And again, I appreciate that, Michael has, it's not about the how long it takes. It's the journey that's important. Does that answer your question? I've started going off on the
Yeah, I think that's
other
great.
direction.
Michael, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I think again where we got into the comment debate sort of thing, I just think the term best is a very dangerous one to use. Like JP has such a strong voice and he's obviously got his hook point PR type stuff down. And I just think with such an authority and such a loud voice, I think anybody using the term best or better needs to take into account that the world is full of a beautiful gray area and there just is no best. Yeah, best for what? Is it best for you to make more money? Is it best for you to save time? Is it best for the client? Is it best for the journey of creation and having the experience of making it? Is it best because you don't have to make it and you can go to your kid's birthday party? Like, best is just so subjective. And that's something, because I am a super literal guy, that's something I'm always going to be protective of, mostly knowing that there are young people out there listening and they're impressionable and they're moldable. And I just want to protect creativity in humans so that they don't think there's one best, one path, or have like aspirations knocked out of them. And then, secondly, just really quick, I believe anything can be handmade. I think to say, something can't be handmade is just because it would take a lot of time. and I can devote years to doing something if I want to do something. Anything can be handmade. Just look what's been done for centuries. And before even electricity was invented, there are pieces made today that don't come close to what was done before electricity was invented. So yeah, they're my 2 points there.
Okay, I'm going to open the floor to have each of you ask each other questions if you would like, or have just more of a natural discussion here.
Sure. I'd like to just respond to I think, I think we have the same passion when we got into our, comments discussion on CAD versus fabricated. I think my takeaway was kind of the exact same as yours, Michael, but on from a different perspective. I'm a bit of a defender of all of the CAD people out there, because I actually physically I do know how to use Rhino and SolidWorks. I don't do the CAD. I focus on the design, and when I get to the bench, my happy places is engraving, working on a piece of jewelry, fabricating something, doing a sample, or sketching is really my happiest place. And then there's the running of the business that gets in the way. But the CAD designers I've worked with in my career are so wildly talented. It upsets me when someone says anything CAD is somehow cheating or somehow not as good as handmade. If you had meet the kind of people that are jewelers in their own right, are artists in their own right, who could do an oil painting but choose to use CAD as their medium because they're that goddamn talented, sculpting in a virtual space, you'd be like, shit, I mean, these people are really talented. And the kind of what they can produce digitally is impressive. I remember speaking to one of the lead CAD designers from Tiffany & Co. who did the koi fish. If you were to look at that model, you would be nothing short of impressed by, there was no square blocky tubes. Like every scale was beautiful. Every part of the fish's head beautiful in 3D. And it's just like, I think to myself, like this is a specialty part of our industry that gets zero respect. And most of the people who are doing it at the best level are stupidly talented. So I'm just like, hey, I mean, we should be a little bit more respectful. There's a lot of crappy CAD jewelry out there.
Did you
There's a lot
think
of
I was
revolved tubes and
disrespectful?
blocky stuff.
Did you think I was
Sorry?
disrespectful? Did you think I was disrespectful towards CAD people? I'm always
Uh,
super cautious to not be. I'm passionate about what I do, but like I said,
I mean,
I'm big on letting people do what they want to do.
I think, I mean, you summed it up as like all you do is, press print, or like all you have to do is print it. I mean, it's like saying all you do is
Yeah.
use a dapping block.
Yeah. No, I didn't say that. I'd invite you to go back and read it. I didn't say that because I know that's not. I've been in the industry long enough that I know that's not what you do. I have great respect for CAD designers if that's the choice that they want to do. I think cool for them. Um, it's if I admired, like you're saying, a person's work and they're like the Da Vinci of CAD files, I'd probably be more tempted to buy like an NFT of their CAD file because that's where they've, as you say, that's where they've sculpted their work. And I do own NFTs, just to give some context. I'm not totally opposed to it. But then as work gets 3D printed, the only point where I said there's something best is in the metallurgy, where something that's forged, that's the only best, scientifically best. Something that's hand forged can be like 30% more dense and scratch resistant and less prone to, well, zero porosity because the the metal gets aligned and forged and compressed. That's the only where I said there is a better and best, but that's not to take anything away from CAD people. That's to just quote science. I promise you, I'm always super careful not to belittle CAD. I am very passionate about the joys in actually working with your hands. But if somebody wants to work on a computer, cool. Just a
Is
different
there
market.
space for creativity to exist in a digitally rendered space?
You mean like an AI rendering?
Yes.
I mean, you can't say know. I see all these like younger jewelers who are, I wish I had their talent at their age. Like the world is so full of crazy talented people. One of those people is going to do something spectacular that nobody's ever seen before using AI. I mean, for sure. I think, I was thinking about this discussion the other day, and I was thinking like, no one really like paints like Caravaggio today. And then I was like, actually they do. Like this, again, if you're on TikTok, you see these like young artists who are in their early 20s, and they are like, they've had access to all of the information of what the masters did. They know the materials, they know how to mix the same paints, and they are they've studied anatomy, and they are freakishly talented. But someone will do that with AI software. Do I think it's going to be valued? This goes back to kind of what Michael was saying. It's like, you know, the proof of work and the time put into it is what human beings value. And there's always this like technology gap. Like when the first photograph comes out, it's expensive. But then the second photograph comes out, and people start to get portraits done, the price drops down. It's because there's no work done. It's like, this is just a rapid thing, So I am sure if I didn't have all of the other aspects that I do one-on-one with a client in terms of like listening to them and helping create a piece of jewelry that's special to them, if all I did was prompt and didn't do all of my illustrating, I think the value of my work would plummet. And I think anybody, to Michael, I brought this up, if you're just producing AI slop, I mean, I think you're in the business of sales at volume and scale, and you're trying to reduce costs at every single point. And I would add, Michael touched on a lot of points that I thought were really interesting. I think, and this is specifically why I use AI software in my company, is so that I can spend more time doing the creative stuff. And so my team can spend more time doing the creative stuff. The first thing I did with Sirosha when we started developing our software was fix pricing, because it would take me or someone in my team 1 to 3 hours to go through previous bills of materials, roll up our costs, calculate volumes, figure out, call the stone cutter. I'm going to cut, 30 baguettes, and these are the angles. What's that going to cost me? Like all of that would take an enormous amount of time, plus all the engraving work. But to be able to take the learned experience from the last 4 years of, designing jewelry and all the bills of materials and roll it up into a technology that's freakishly accurate and do that whole process in like 5 to 10 minutes, what did take 2 hours. I don't want to do an Excel spreadsheet. I want it to be accurate. That's why I do it. But now I've got a software that does it like that.
Yeah. Okay, let me just point something out here, because I'm hearing you both, and I recognize that you're both storytellers. You just tell stories in different ways, right? And so Michael has really emphasized that a lot of the story goes into the journey of the creation of the piece and how the piece unfolds in his hands. What I'm understanding is that the creation and the story of the piece happens before it even hits metal in your shop to some degree. Would you agree with that or not? Like you know what the final piece is going to look like before you even start production.
Yeah, so in my process, the vision that's in my head is fleshed out as far as I can take it on paper.
Right.
Or if we can't do it on paper, it's modeled in clay or plasticine. And then once we have the vision, then we figure out how we're going to make it.
So another thing that both of you said that I really want to highlight, because I think it's really important, and it notes to the overwhelming majority of my listeners who are young jewelers like myself, per se. Are there any cautions, being so pro utilization of AI in design as you are, JP? Are there any cautions that you would also put out there? Because I think to what Michael is maybe alluding to is like, don't discourage someone from pursuing mastering a craft because they're then handicapped by AI because they utilize it so much that they depend on it. Is there anything that you would necessarily like caution towards for a young user who is entering the jewelry industry brand new?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really, really valid point that Michael brought up. I struggle with a few of the ideas because I think the sad reality is that I have a lot of exposure to other brands because of Facet Flow and because of my previous consulting. When I left David Yoma, I did a lot of consulting. A lot of jewelry companies couldn't care less about the design. It's like it's an afterthought. They're in the business of selling jewelry. There is a layer of people who are interested in design. So on the one hand, yes, like to David's point, you know, and I'm the first person to tell every single person, Nadia, I don't know if I gave you this advice. I tell everybody, learn to sketch. It will be the most valuable thing you ever do. And AI will definitely do exactly what Michael's saying. It will make people say, I don't need to learn this. I agree with him. I think less people will learn watercolor. That's great for me. It's amazing for Michael. And I think it will impair because
It's
of
not.
that sheer. I'm actually agreeing with your point. So
It's
perhaps you
yeah,
can
no, it's
unpack.
not good for me. I want to see everybody being creative. I want to see humans thriving and being creative. So it's not good for me that less people are getting to experience the joy that I get to experience in
It
painting.
gives you a niche, but to say that, I think if we come out of this like that AI is going to happen and everyone's going to just be less creative, I think kind of undermines the passion and creativity of the jewelry community that's out there. They're wildly creative, and they've got more access to knowledge than any jewelers in history. So I think they're just going to use it in their own way. But I would caution that, in the same way that David, I'm sorry, I apologize, I keep calling you that. In the same way
No
that
problem.
Michael finds this, and this is what I'm understanding more and more about him, is he finds this joy and this like importance of the actual fabricating in the making process. In the same way he has that, I have that in the fleshing it out and the designing it on paper.
Yeah.
And building this design idea. That's super important to me in my design process, is to unpack every surface and sculpt it and know that this is the sculpture that I'm building. You'd hate to rob
I
that
do
of
think
young people.
Yeah, I do think that's the important part. I think the joy and the effort and the time and the care that you put into drawing, obviously I do that, but then I get the joy to actually put that same joy, the same time, the same passion in hand forging the piece. I then get to put that same time, care, attention into setting the stones, engraving the stones, taking the photography, making the box. Like rather than one little segment of joy and creativity, I get to stretch that out across the whole process. And many other people do too. And I just love encouraging people to be able to experience what I experience and what you experience in the starting point, to like follow through. But I have to say that is from a point of privilege, to where I genuinely don't believe I am a brand or a business. I'm just a person working with their hands. And that is different to most other people. But I think, can we talk for a second about, and again, it was a little bit accused that I don't give respect to CAD a little bit. Why, JP, do you think it is that so many people that are using CAD and 3D printing, like I saw a piece on might have been Hype Beast or something just this morning about Cartier's new something or another. And they had this great video of like a human hunched over a sketchbook drawing something. And then all of a sudden it flipped to like, I think the headline was like, this brand shows you how a piece is made. But it flipped from like an obviously staged human drawing something to like assembling the final pieces. I don't feel like I don't like CAD. I feel like many of the brands using CAD don't like it because they're so ashamed of it that they kind of hide. How often have you seen like a 3D printer? Well, even in your process, why aren't we seeing like 3D printers forming a lot of it? Like, I feel like the people using technology are ashamed of technology, which tells us that it's not creative or hurting creativity.
I think, I mean, like watching a 3D printer print is like pretty boring, and
But they
it's
don't
like,
even like show them.
why don't we see like the sweeps on your bench, or the file, like photos of the up close of the
I've done that.
sandpaper, or the package that your latest polishing mop was delivered in. I mean, like, I don't think anyone's ashamed of it. I'm not. I mean, here's why I do what I do. When we need to hand fabricate, we do. When we think the design is going to be executed the best, by using 3D modeling. All wax, we do a lot of wax. We predominantly use CAD because it gives us the most control, and we're often engraving surfaces anyway or doing inlay. It's just easier to put lines in there. One of the jewelers, George William Jewelry, who works out of our shop, he does some work for us. He does his own independent work. 5 years at Cartier. And this is a story I've heard multiple times and something that I've actually tested. There was a 6 carat ring at the Cartier studio, and one of the jewelers, who is a wizard hand fabricator, said, "Hey, why are we casting this? The result would be so much better if we hand fabbed it." Michael, you probably heard similar stories before, and I'm sure you would disagree. But the company said, "Okay, let's do this. Let's make this 8-piece casting, and we'll do it our conventional modern way. And then we'll give this jeweler free range to just fab it by hand." And a blind test, the end result, the piece that was selected as the, I hate to use the word best, but like the nicest piece of jewelry on the table was the one that used computer-aided design. And in many ways, I can hear you disagreeing with me, but like, you can plot stones more precisely. You can make cleaner edges. You can create better joints. You can create volumes and shapes that are truer to the design intent. And I think the major difference between what I do and what you do is because you are the designer, the maker, and the seller, like you do all of those spots together. There's no need to use CAD, because you don't need to use CAD as a instruction booklet, communication tool, and guide, where that's a lot of what CAD is. It's not only the metal to work on, but it's also a surface to understand the design intent and the outcome, along with plenty of instructions for, the jeweler to work towards. In the end, most of the time, again, maybe not for your jewelry, but using CAD can actually make the piece of jewelry far superior and far better. Not always, but
Just quickly,
it's a really powerful
I
tool.
I'm going to go ahead and really quickly, I'm going to interject, Michael, and then I'm going to give you the floor. I do want to stay focused on the integrity of creativity. I feel like we've deviated just a little bit, but let's refocus back on the integrity of creativity and the implementation of AI in design. I also think it's important for us to define that the difference between product and art, right? Because I do think that we've veered a little bit where we've discussed around the difference of product, but I think both of you propose your work as art. And so I want to ask, is the implementation of artificial intelligence in the design process, does that undermine the integrity of the creativity?
Right.
Michael, you will have the floor here, and then you will each get the opportunity to make a closing statement.
I mean, I got to say, I don't know a lot about AI, but what I've heard from here, I I hear all things that are great to make things faster and quicker and cheaper and easier. I'm not hearing things that stretch the creativity. And actually, I don't know the dictionary definition, but to me, creativity has to be human. I don't think computers can be creative, but I could be wrong there what the definition, but I think you need a human element to actually have creativity. I know you can't copyright AI designs because the Supreme Court doesn't think that it has human authorship, so therefore cannot be copyrighted. So I think that's another indication that it's not creative and therefore not helping creativity. And I just think about like a few one thought that sort of popped to my mind as JP was talking was like, I don't think the team of craftsmen in Fabergé's workshop, after they finished the winter imperial egg or any of the imperial eggs, I don't think they all stood around looking at what they had accomplished and said, man, I wish there was an AI program that could design this and a 3D printer that could print all of these pieces so that we can just assemble it like a Lego set. But now that that does exist, and people, there aren't many people that get to feel the satisfaction of seeing a piece of jewelry and knowing that it was made not for time saving, not for brand, not to sell it, but just for the expression of being able to create something from their heart by their hand. And I think the fact that AI even exists does take away from that. Like I said, I'm sure that team of craftspeople wouldn't have thought, man, we just finished this beautiful egg, but boy, I wish we didn't have to work so hard on it. I wish there was technology that would just design it or 3D print these pieces. So yeah, I mean, again, how does AI, how is it not positive towards creativity? I think to be creative, you have to be human. So I think the fact that it isn't human, I think that takes away from creativity. And I mean, I think it's great if, I think it's great if you want to like turn yourself into superheroes or something like that. But for actually expressing an artistic thought, I think it's just a filter that takes any creativity out of what you've got to say or do because it's not human.
JP, are you prepared to make your closing remarks?
Sure.
Go ahead.
The fabrication egg is a good example. I tell you what, the craftspeople would say if they had access to technology and AI. First of all, the design team would have produced a better design. They would have been able to quickly sketch and roll through their design process much faster. And I know you keep talking about speed's not the end goal, but it is an underlying principle of design that it's a velocity of ideas. If you only draw one picture or two of your design versus 50, the person who draws 50 is going to produce a more refined, complex, beautiful result. That's, at least to my knowledge, that is the underlying principle of every major design house and every major design school. So velocity of ideas, you've now got a tool that you can draw a line drawing, or you can do quick illustrations and quick form studies. So the Fabergé egg would have been better designed. They would have had a more beautiful composition. They might have had a better mechanism because they've had more access to unpacking some of those thoughts. I would say the craftspeople would have had a hell of a lot more time because once you can actually take a photo now of a sketch, turn it into a mesh file and 3D print that. So the craftspeople would have had an enormous amount more leg up in actually assembling parts and prototyping, because I don't think they would have made that egg in one shot. It would have been prototyped many, many times. The enamelists would have produced far more beautiful enamel designs by being able to use AI to reimagine multiple different real samples from a photo library where they could put that over the different pockets. The design team could have sat, looked at the virtual egg, and they could have gone, you know what? I don't like the straight line engraving here. Why don't we hand cut that with beautiful rolling scroll work? Because I think that would complement, the princess or the czar, blah, 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 better. And, perhaps these legs, I think they could be a little higher or a little more raised. There is just so much more opportunity to perfect your design and be a more professional craftsperson by utilizing these tools. Because at the end result is you're trying to get to this finished object in its most perfect form. So if you can immediately see it, go through the color, the swatches, save time and actually spend more time doing the engraving or more time hand hammering out the legs and doing the beautiful acanthia scroll work by hand, as opposed to the one or two time-consuming prototypes and the one gouache painting, it would have been a far better egg.
And Michael, your closing statement?
Yeah, I just think we think differently. Everything you're saying to me makes sense if you're designing a product. It doesn't make sense if you're trying to express something. I don't want something that's sanitized and had all of the jeopardy and the human touch like rang out of it. I think it's
I
great
don't
if you're
understand why you
designing a
say it's
product.
removed. Like who's removing it?
Well, you were talking about like sanitizing the design and filtering it through to the point where. Sorry, Nadja, do you want to say something?
I was just going to say the term perfection stood out to me.
Yeah, perfection. It just sounds, and it's totally cool. I'm not saying a product is bad. I'm just saying it doesn't seem very creative to me.
But I don't understand in my example where I'm like, take the same craftspeople, right? Allow them to spend less time doing some of the time consuming barriers that have no meaningful impact on A,
That's what
time
I value.
fabricating, B,
That's what
painting.
you're saying, that you value all the process and the drawings and the work you do. Like not having not having that authorship of all of the things. I mean, when I do a drawing for something, I've already drawn it 300 times in my head, thought about it intensely, and then maybe I do a handful of sketches. But to be honest, I don't even need to do the sketches. As you said, it's in my head. I'm making it. I think it's great what you're saying. I think it's great for product. I don't think it's great for creativity and expression. I really don't. I think it's just one of those things we're going to have to disagree on.
I just want to be clear that I feel like you somehow sum up, like if I say the word AI or any sort of technology, somehow you keep using this word that I didn't use, sanitize. Um,
That's what I
in no
heard.
way,
That's
shape,
what I
or form.
understood.
Yeah, but that's not what it's not what I said. If you took those same craftspeople and you gave them these tools, those same craftspeople who are just like you and just like me, who are passionate about what their work, somehow you're basically saying that if they had access to get more work done in one day, they would do a worse job. I would say that they would be able to look at more enamel examples and study their subject matter better. They would be able to perfect their design more intently. They'd be able to put more time into what you love. They would have had more weeks in their year making that piece of craft. And I'd also say a lot of those Russian jewelers around the time of Fabergé, him and Berlin, were one of the few that actually had a business that survived. Most of them went broke because they couldn't price their jewelry out effectively, and they spent too long making their jewelry and they never got paid. Um, but I wouldn't whitewash using technology as sanitizing or not doing the craft. I would say it gives you more time to do the most important stuff.
I'd like to
Can I
offer
just
an
say one
alternative
more thing?
word. Yes, you
Hmm.
will get the floor again. I would just like to
Yeah.
offer an alternative word because I think we're getting caught in the vocabulary of this. I think another way to maybe conceptualize this would be the word agency. So I think you're both advocating for agency. JP advocating for the ability to utilize these tools in a broader expanse and be able to do more. I think what Michael is arguing is that those tools limit one's agency because then it doesn't develop on their own. Is that correct for both of you?
Sort of, yeah. I don't think that people would be getting more work done in the day. I think AI would be doing something and they wouldn't be getting more done because the AI is taking the thinking process out of their hands. I get I can't remember what you said, but something about a lot of the people going broke. I'm not saying taking the creative path is the best way to make money or the fastest way to make money. It's really not a concern or something I think about. And I'm sure the term starving artist exists for a reason. But again, creativity isn't about making money. That's more brand, and product is about making money.
Well, and let me also clarify that Michael has done well because he has so singularly focused on the journey of that, and that's where people see that. And like you said, JP, at the beginning, people do value that and how they and how he has start to finish produced his pieces. We do have to wrap up because I think we could keep going for the longest possible time. Gentlemen, thank you both for coming on and putting yourselves out there. I don't think we got to a conclusion, but I wasn't expecting to come to a conclusion. I think this is just the beginning of a very long and interesting and in-depth argument. Um, I would love to encourage further discussion. I would love to encourage um, anyone listening to really consider what both gentlemen have proposed in this hour that we've had together. And I would love, as time develops for maybe these thoughts and again, because I truly believe this is just the start of this conversation. And with the atmosphere and the economy of artificial intelligence changing so fast, we may not have even foreseen what is yet to come. And so I look forward to potentially developing this relationship as things become more and more available, and to see just how it actually plays out in real life. So, gentlemen, thank you. Maybe we come back again in a year's time and continue this conversation as things change, and to see the impact. Again, we're right at the forefront of this conversation, and I would be really curious to see how things develop. Thank you for your time.
You're so welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Pass the Torch Legacies in Jewelry. Again, my name is Nadja DeSavendiste. I have the honor of being your host. We had Jean-Paul on today, and his Instagram is JPX Jewelry. His AI account or business is Facet Flow. And we were also joined by Michael Robinson, who is at David Michael Jewels on Instagram. I value them both and appreciate their time and energy that they put into this conversation. Again, I don't think that it was necessarily concluded by any standard. I think this conversation is going to grow and develop, but I think a lot of really interesting perspectives were proposed in this episode, and I look forward to seeing how you, the audience, respond. So if you would love to leave a comment below, please do. You can find me at Pass the Torch Jewelers on Instagram or on YouTube and Facebook. And this episode can be listened to on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else that you find your podcasts. Thank you again for tuning in. Again, my name is Nadja. I'm a young jeweler, and I created this podcast as a curiosity podcast, a place where I could speak to, talk to, and learn from the best jewelers and industry professionals in the world. That's exactly what I'm doing, and I feel so grateful to do it. Thank you again. Have a great rest of your day. I appreciate you tuning in. I'll see you on the next episode.